Okay, so I've got the good slot just before lunch, so I'm going to talk to you about the RSPO. Okay, so I'm going to chat through the RSPO, which is the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. So you've heard about the toolbox and how we put oils and fats together. You've heard a little bit about deforestation and the social risks, and now hopefully we're going to start introducing the solution. So the RSPO was formed in 2004 and it was established to promote the production of sustainable palm oil for people, planet and prosperity. And interestingly enough, AAK is a founding member of the RSPO and were the first people to bring sustainable palm oil into the UK in 2008. So the RSPO is a non-profit organisation which has been developed to implement standards for palm oil. And it's set environmental and social criteria which companies must adhere to produce certified sustainable palm oil. It has 4,000 members worldwide and basically all heading in the same direction. There is a vision and mission statement. So the RSPO will transform markets to make sustainable palm oil the norm, advance the production and procurement and finance of the sustainable palm oil products, develop, implement and verify, monitor and evaluate, engage and commit all stakeholders. And obviously you can see some of those notes there. But one of the key things is about taking people on a journey. Everybody has to work together. There isn't a government body saying, okay, well, here's the rule, this is how we're going to do it. This is all about voluntary action. So the finance guys are very important to this, as well as the actual growers themselves. This statement, I thought, is a really useful one and is made by Darrell Weber, who is the CEO of the RSPO, and he made this in 2017, that irresponsible palm oil cultivation has a negative environmental and social impact is beyond question. Yet 62 million tonnes of palm oil were consumed in 2017 and demand is expected to reach 240 million tonnes by 2050 in the race to feed a growing population. So we've already heard from Kevin as well that the new figure is out that it's over 70 million tonnes. And so it is grown in that short space of time, mainly driven by plantations who have got improved yields. But equally, this is never going to go away, and it is pretty scary when you think about that figure for 2050. So what are we going to do about it? Well, as we've heard from other speakers, palm oil is very popular, it's relatively cheap, it's the most versatile, and when you're comparing it to to the other oils, those four equate to about 80% of the total market worldwide. So when Kevin is at AAK looking at his box of tricks, that's why they're picking from those major oils. As we've noted, it's the most versatile. We talked about fractionation, and actually palm oil is probably only one of 5 oils that you can actually fractionate. There's something like 75 different plants and seeds that we can extract oil from. So it's very narrow, that level of fractionation, which again gives you this huge versatility. It's high yielding, and one of those reasons it is that you harvest it every 10 days. So whereas rapeseed and soya and sunflower is only harvested once a year, every 10 days somebody's going and picking that fruit. It does have its peaks and troughs, but overall that's what makes it the most widely produced oil in the world. I think we've all said, there's maybe one slide out of the presentation that we'd like you to take away. And basically, this is my slide that I would just suggest that you memorise, if you like. It's based on data from 2015. We will be expecting new data coming out. But basically what you can see is that for all the land that is planted to fat and oil seeds, if you like, soya is the light green, rapeseed is the yellow, cotton the blue, sunflower, and then palm oil, and then the darker colour is other oils. Palm oil only uses 6.6% of that total land use. So if you can imagine the traffic that you hear about the negative side of palm oil's only using 6.6% of the land. yet it produces 38.7% of the total production of those oils and fats. So it's massive. So again, when we hear statements in the press about people like Iceland banning palm, or we're going to go away from palm oil, overall that is never going to happen in the world. One of the things that I often quote is in the UK, last year we brought in 437,000 tonnes of palm oil, crude or refined, into the UK. In India, so that was over 1 year. So in India, they're using between 900 and 950,000 tonnes per month. So it's important to us because of its versatility, but you look at India, it's off the scale in terms of its usage. So in terms of land use, palm oil is the highest yielding, as we've already said, so it's using 10 times less land. And you can see here in terms of the actual yield factors of the actual sizes of the bottle, it gives you a bit of a feel of that. And the palm oil crop yields more than coconut, soybean, rapeseed, groundnut oil or sunflower combined. And as we've said, replacing palm oil would use far more land than we could get hold of. So it is absolutely the crop of the day. We touched as well on palm oil and where you actually use it. I laugh at where palm oil is used, and I was talking earlier, I've been trying to compile a list for where palm oil is used, and one of the ones I love is toilet paper. It's in moist toilet paper. It'll be the glycerin that's in toilet paper. It can be in shampoo, conditioners and soap. It's in toothpaste. Again, it's in toothpaste in glycerin, which is the backbone. If you remember, Kevin was talking about the actual oil structure itself, the fat molecule. It's that backbone that we use. It's in things like cereal. It's in pet food, all sorts of deodorants. So again, when you're in your daily life and you can imagine getting out of bed and all of the things that you're doing, you're touching it all of the time. So certainly this morning you'll have used it. Definitely if you managed to clean your teeth and wash your face, and if you had some type of dairy spread. And then at lunchtime, the bread that you eat will no doubt contain palm oil. Off you go. You will see it all over the place. So palm oil and palm kernel is used predominantly in food. Palm oil is 77% with oleochemicals and biofuels. And palm kernel, because of the different applications, has a flip side and is used in more oleochemicals. So we do use it in chocolate in food, but predominantly used in oleochemicals. So let's get on to a bit more nitty-gritty about palm oil and why RSPO. So I know you won't be able to necessarily read this at the back, but this is basically looking at how plants are distributed throughout the world. And this slightly darker coloured green here is really flagging at where it's our wildlife is very important. And surprisingly, that is just where palm oil production comes from. So again, when we're looking in the media and the negative stories, it's hitting that area which has got the most biodiversity. Then we've also talked about people. The dark coloured pinks, and it goes down into the lighter colours. Where it's dark pink, that is where we have the greatest poverty. So the darkest colour is 60% of the population is under the poverty line. So again, we've just noted that's where palm oil is coming from. So palm oil is so important to smallholders. And again, just very quickly touching on this, Indonesia and Malaysia have 40% of their production comes from smallholders. So if we suggest that we're going to move away from palm oil, we're really affecting these people. It's about sending girls to school. It's about healthcare. And then it just runs down the different countries. With Nigeria at the bottom, they don't export palm oil. They are growing palm oil to feed themselves, and they're going to be the largest or third largest country population-wise in the next few years. So 94% of their production is grown by smallholders. RSPO today is 13.6 million tonnes of certified sustainable palm oil, and in the next few minutes we're going to look at what makes it certified. There are over 3,000 mills worldwide, of which RSPO is only 354, which is why it's only producing 19%. So there are increases, and you can see the pinks on here are all the different areas where the mills are. In terms of commitment to certified sustainable palm oil, Europe has a major commitment to it, with the Amsterdam Declaration that we've already touched on, but you can see countries such as Australia and America, India and China. What is interesting, America is an emerging market. They love hydrogenation, and therefore it's not the same issue to them. Having said that, Obama, just before he left power, actually put a bill through to stop trans fats. So we're going to see a spike in palm oil, and they have the greatest membership of RSPO today. So palm oil supply chain. Basically, it starts off at a plantation. Everything is picked within a 50-kilometre radius. It gets put on a truck. It goes to a mill where it's actually extracted, goes to a collection port. Everything has to come via ship. And then once it gets into somewhere like the UK, we have 3 major refineries, one at Liverpool, one at Hull, and one in the London area. They refine it, and then it goes off into a food manufacturer, which then might end into, say, like cookies, and then ends up in a university. So let's take a closer look at certified sustainable palm oil, which is commonly known as CSPO. So the RSPO has basically 2 certification systems. One is the principles and criteria, which is about the mill and its base. So it has to have quite a different audit of that basis, and it tends to last 5 days, and it's looking at all sorts of different things about high conservation value of the area. It's looking at social issues, quite an in-depth audit. And then there is a second one, which is the supply chain certification standard, which is for independent mills, those that don't have a supply base, and then basically throughout the supply chain. So why is it important to introduce this to you? Well, we've just had the question about how do we find out if something's sustainable. Because it's RSPO, this is how you can track it. So you can see it through either trademark use or information on websites. And one of the ideas is that TUCO would like to become part of RSPO and like to become supply chain certified. So this afternoon you're going to hear a little bit more about certification. Both systems have a third-party audit to take place. The principles and criteria of the RSPO have been pulled together by its membership, which ranges from palm oil growers, traders, consumer goods manufacturers, NGOs, and certainly a speaker this afternoon from the Orangutan Land Trust is somebody that's heavily involved within that, and you'll get a bit of a background of what they think about the RSPO, and also people like retailers. It's basically a certification scheme which allows the trademark to be used. These are the 8 principles and criteria which the mill itself is audited to, and its supply base. One of the things that happened in November is there's some new principles of criteria are going to come about. They are improved, and we should see that number drop to 7, where it's a little bit more focused. But really, just to give you an idea, principles and criteria, what's all that about? Well, let's start off with something that is quite easy to understand. Before the RSPO, chemical storage, things like were just left in, not clearly labelled, certainly not using protective clothing. In South America in particular, we have seen people having chemicals under their bed where their kids are actually sleeping. And, again, they don't actually understand why is that a problem. When RSPO comes in, it means that workers have to have proper personal protection, and that the spraying, the pumps are stored properly. And this can go down to things like having policies for women, because one of the things is that because this is light work, the men do the hard work of moving the big fruit bunches about. The women tend to handle all the chemicals because they're spraying the young crops. So again, these are little things that you don't maybe think about, but are so important. In terms of one of the other principles, responsible development of new plantations, basically deciding which land you can and can't take. So the new principles are also going to include something called high carbon stock, which looks at the canopy levels as well as the soil below. One of the things to say is that, what is a forest? When I live in Yorkshire, I go to Dalby Forest, well, that's a forest to me. Well, it's not a forest in places like this. And yet you can't dictate to people about what they can take without having some understanding of what is maybe land that could be used, that is scrub land versus something that's high conservation value area where the forest is absolutely essential that it remains. Also, planting on peatland is a major issue where the soils are fragile. Peatland is often set alight, and once it's alight, they can't put it out, and obviously releases carbon into the atmosphere. In 2015, there were major fires in Indonesia, and over 100,000 people died prematurely due to the fires that were set alight. Also, social responsibility. This was taken by a colleague. The school was built on a plantation specifically aimed at getting girls into school. So the next part of the audit supply chain is something called the supply chain certification audit. That can start at an independent mill where it doesn't have a supply base and basically works throughout the supply chain. So everybody who wants to take part has to submit to an audit at different levels. But this allows you to then make sure that when something's in a product, you can actually understand if it does contain certified sustainable palm oil. So, as I've said, the mill is the start of the certification under the principles and criteria, and it has a responsibility to cover its supply base. We also have different levels of supply chain. These are just really to put them in your mind, don't worry about it too much. But you do have something called identity preserved, and what that means is that you know exactly where it's coming from. It's focused back on one mill, and throughout the supply chain, through those refineries and different tanks into the end food manufacturer, it's kept completely separate. Hardly anybody uses this because it's so expensive to use. There is a little bit in this country, and it tends to be organic. There is something called segregated. So when we're using segregated, it could come from Papua New Guinea, and it could also be Indonesia. Both mills have been certified to the principles and criteria. And it starts off as identity preserved, but as it goes through the supply chain, through the oil, through the tankers, through all of the different shipping purposes, actually into the end user, it can be mixed. So it becomes segregated. So again, one of the things to say about AAK and many of the other suppliers is that if they are using segregated palm oil in this product, you actually know it's going back to about 150 mils. So traceability-wise, it's quite strong. Mass balance is always a difficult one to describe, but basically what it means is there is RSPO certified, but there are also mills that are non-certified. I witnessed somebody doing some plotting about mills and where these mills were and where they were taking from, and it was fascinating looking at the concentration and how many mills were all in this area. So they do buy from lots of different places, and if they're not certified, that's when material can get into the supply chain. But also they could be smallholders. Smallholders are very important and often struggle to become certified. So the RSPO do not exclude non-certified product. And this is basically what mass balance is all about. It means that something that is not certified is in the supply chain, and sometimes you will see it labelled as mixed. There is also something called RSPO Credits. Basically what happens is that the mills or the crushers or independent smallholders are certified to the principles and criteria. They actually put that amount onto an IT platform as a credit, and you can go and buy those credits so that you can make a claim that you support the production of certified sustainable palm oil. Interestingly enough, when palm oil RSPO first started, credits were one of the only ways you could support it. Now it's reduced a lot more, and more people are going to physical, and in this country it's hardly used at all. So the benefits of RSPO is that it's certified from the mill all the way through the supply base to the end user. The audits take place annually, so there is a huge level of control. The principles and criteria audits, which are the mill themselves, are publicly available. It captures both environmental and social issues, and again, social issues are the bit that keeps getting ignored. We're very worried about orangutans, and it's very iconic. And I think that we just need to focus on not only animals such as the orangutan, but the total environment, but also realise that it's educating people. And I think, Michelle, when you maybe talk later, it's interesting to note that poaching and hunting can be a real issue within these areas. So really understanding how it affects people is important. Encourages best practice. Supply chain certification standard creates this chain, and IP and segregated gives a level of traceability. So really, the RSPO is about doing the right thing. This is a map of Borneo, 1950, 1985, so the green is disappearing. And by the time it gets to 2020, there is hardly any forest seemingly been there. I have yet to see what a new map been produced. This was produced by Greenpeace. But it's certainly scary where you think of how much forest has gone in that time frame. We've touched on the orangutan, which is a really special species and is iconic in palm oil. And so we really need to give animals and the environment key focus. The fact that fires happen are really something that we need to stop taking place. And we can't forget the smallholder. I mean, this guy has literally picked that crop today, and it's probably the only way he's going to send his children to school or have medical health care. So my final slide is demand is that the present RSPO certified sustainable production is only 19% of the world's market. And without demand, this will not increase. So sitting here today, you might think, well, what's my part? It's really something that you can do something about by looking at what your suppliers are doing, and are they RSPO members? Are they actually buying any certified sustainable palm oil? Palm oil is here to stay. It's a valuable crop to the world, and your support to create change is vital. So that ends my part of the presentation. So you are entitled to lunch. So I think we'll go to lunch from here. Yeah.